By the midpoint of the First World War, the British Empire was stretched to its absolute limits, relying on hundreds of thousands of Indian soldiers. This footage from the European theater illustrates the scale of that military contribution, which generated a massive expectation of political reward back in India. That expectation crystallized in 1916 when the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League held a joint session, setting aside historical differences to form a united political front. The resulting Lucknow Pact provided the British Crown with a highly specific, unified list of structural demands for governing the country. The British response came 1 year later in 1917, delivered by the new Secretary of State for India, Edwin Montagu. Montagu's August Declaration shifted imperial strategy away from merely increasing Indian participation toward the specific goal of establishing a responsible government. In legal terms, this meant designing an administration that was chosen by and accountable to the Indian people. The Government of India Act 1919 arrived as a mathematical concession, engineered to relieve the specific geopolitical pressures of the war and the unified political demands of the Lucknow Pact. This legislation, known as the Montagu Chelmsford Reforms, stands as the central pivot point of modern Indian constitutional history. Evaluating this act requires mapping its legislative design against the specific demands of the 1916 Lucknow Pact. A precise audit of the transfer of power deconstructs the British administration into 3 distinct structural levels. These include the ultimate control centered in London, the executive administration in Delhi, and the central legislature. The map of Indian demands against British legislative design reveals the precise architecture of imperial survival. This building in London served as the absolute top of the British Indian hierarchy, the office of the Secretary of State for India. The Lucknow Pact raised a specific financial grievance regarding this office. As a British cabinet minister, the secretary's salary was being drained entirely from Indian tax funds. The demand was for the British Treasury, not the Indian Treasury, to pay for its own minister. The 1919 Act provided a legislative countermove, creating a brand new office in London called the High Commissioner of India. The Secretary of State retained all political and administrative power, with his salary finally transferred to the British taxpayer. However, the new High Commissioner took over the agency work, similar to a modern embassy, and this office remained funded by India. While the British technically fulfilled the financial demand regarding the secretary's salary, they structurally protected their control by keeping the true political power fully insulated in London. Shifting focus from London to the Executive Power Center in Delhi leads to the Viceroy's Executive Council. Under the previous 1909 Act, the Executive Council consisted of 6 members, with only 1 slot allocated to an Indian. The 1919 Act tripled this representation, increasing the number of Indian members to 3. Despite this increase, the total size of the council remained capped at 6 members. Expanding the Indian presence in the Executive Council provided the appearance of shared governance without surrendering the Viceroy's ultimate executive authority. The primary battleground for Indian representation was the central legislature, eventually housed in the vast circular architecture of the Sansad Bhawan. The 1919 Act dismantled the old single imperial legislative council entirely. In its place, the British introduced bicameralism, a complex 2-house system modeled directly on the structure of their own parliament in London. These 2 new chambers were the Legislative Assembly, acting as the lower house, and the Council of States, acting as the upper house. This structure created a direct conflict with the legislative terms demanded in the Lucknow Pact. Indian leaders had explicitly requested a 5-year term for the legislature. The 1919 Act granted this 5-year term exclusively to the upper house, while the lower house remained on a shorter tenure. Bicameralism allowed the British to build a multi-layered legislative maze, effectively diluting the concentrated power of a single, unified Indian house. Auditing the true nature of this act requires a look at the exact math behind these new chambers. The Council of States held 65 seats, with 33 elected members versus 27 nominated by the government. In the Legislative Assembly, 104 of the 145 total seats were elected. The 41 nominated members in the lower house were split between 15 government officials and 26 non-officials. The British engineering of the electorate took place within those 104 elected seats. They expanded the use of separate electorates, dividing voters strictly by religion and community. Those 104 seats were fragmented into 52 general seats, 30 for Muslims, 9 for Europeans, 7 for landlords, 4 for commerce, and 2 for Sikhs. This breakdown addresses a key demand from the Lucknow Act, that Muslims hold exactly 1/3 of the total Indian elected seats. Across both houses, 41 of the 125 total Indian elected seats were reserved for Muslims, fulfilling that demand exactly. By mathematically honoring the Muslim quota while simultaneously expanding separate electorates to Sikhs and Europeans, the British deepened the fractures in Indian society, ensuring the elected majority remained divided. Despite the complex seating math, both the lower and upper houses shared almost identical lawmaking powers. One critical exception gave the lower house a specific advantage: the vote of supply. This was the power to approve, reject, or reduce government expenditure proposals. To resolve inevitable gridlocks between the two chambers, the British designed a system of joint committees, joint conferences, and joint sittings. This complex machinery was built to bleed off political friction without ever stalling the imperial machine. The long-term intent of the 1919 Act is recorded in its preamble. Even with the creation of a bicameral legislature and the expansion of elected seats, the text contained a final, inescapable truth. The preamble stated that India was to remain an integral part of the British Empire. The Government of India Act 1919 delegated administrative burdens while transferring zero ultimate sovereignty. This set the stage for an even more controversial system in the provinces, a system known as diarchy.